Hello and welcome. Today we're going to explore a completely new way of thinking about learning English. We're talking about a blueprint, a method that's really grounded in science. The goal here is to move past those traditional techniques, the ones that so often leave us feeling like we're just spinning our wheels. Instead, we're going to focus on how to make progress that is truly, deeply sustainable. Does this sound familiar? I mean, really, think about it. So many of us get trapped in this loop. You put in all this time, hours and hours memorizing long vocabulary lists, and then poof, a week later, they've just vanished from your memory. Or you study these super complex grammar rules, but the second you're in a real conversation, they seem to completely fail you. It leaves you with this nagging, frustrating feeling that even though you're putting in all the work, your progress just isn't sticking. It's an incredibly common experience, but I'm here to tell you, it absolutely does not have to be your reality. So here's where we pivot. This is the core promise we're going to explore together. Imagine for a moment that we shift our perspective entirely. What if learning English wasn't just another subject you had to check off a list? What if instead it was a powerful tool you could use to actively, and I mean actively, redesign your mind? A tool to help you think with more clarity, to manage your emotions with more skill, and to fundamentally elevate your entire quality of life. That is the journey we're about to map out. All right, let's dive right into our first pillar, the minimalist philosophy. Now, when we hear the word minimalism, our minds might jump to things like clean, simple design or decluttering our homes. But we're talking about something different here. We're talking about applying minimalism as a powerful cognitive strategy for learning. It is all about being incredibly intentional and focused in how we approach new information, cutting through all the noise to get to what truly, truly matters. You see, the science of how our brains pay attention is pretty clear. We are wired to resist information overload. When we're faced with a massive, complicated task, our natural go-to response is often to just put it off, to procrastinate. The minimum viable action, or MVA, is the perfect antidote to this. The principle is beautifully simple. We make the learning content so focused, so manageable, so concise that your mental resistance to just getting started completely disappears. Trust me, 20 minutes of deep, focused effort on one single core concept is infinitely more valuable than 2 hours of scattered, confused studying. And this really shows us a choice between two fundamentally different mindsets. Over on the left, you have toxic perfectionism. This is the mindset that demands flawless grammar, that treats every single mistake like it's a catastrophe. And what does that lead to? It leads to hesitation, fear, and eventually total burnout. But on the right, we have a different goal: fluency and influence. Here, the focus completely shifts to clear communication. And mistakes? Well, mistakes are seen as essential opportunities to build resilience. This is the path that builds real endurance and lasting confidence for long-term growth. And we put this strategy into practice by being very deliberate about what we choose to learn. We focus on what's called high leverage vocabulary. These are words that have a direct, powerful, and immediate impact on your life. So instead of just learning a bunch of random words for emotions like mad, we can focus on the specific vocabulary of emotional intelligence, really understanding the subtle, important differences between words like anger, resentment, and frustration doesn't just make your vocabulary better, it actually gives you the tools to better understand and manage your own emotional world. Okay, let's move on to our second pillar and see how this all connects, because this is where things get really interesting. This is where we fuse the act of learning a language with the psychology of personal achievement. This method sees English not just as some tool for communication, but as a vehicle for achieving genuine, sustainable personal growth. This right here illustrates another absolutely critical mindset shift. So many of us fall into the trap of waiting for motivation to strike before we even think about starting to study. The problem is that approach leads to wildly inconsistent progress that depends entirely on our mood for the day. The alternative? To understand a fundamental truth. Action creates motivation. It's not the other way around. By building a system, a discipline of consistent daily actions, you generate your own momentum. The progress you make becomes the very fuel that keeps you going, day after day. And this brings us to a crucial reframe, our relationship with the idea of failure. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. It is a test of endurance. And you will make mistakes. It's inevitable. But in those moments, you have a choice. You can see failure as some final judgment on your ability, or you can see it for what it truly is: feedback. It is simply data. Data that helps you adjust your approach, get stronger, and build real, lasting resilience. So you might be wondering, what's the process behind creating this kind of content? How do we actually make sure that every single lesson is minimalist, that it's psychologically sound, and that it's scientifically grounded? Well, let's take a look under the hood. This is what we call the engine room. It's what powers this entire learning experience. The commitment here is to deliver content that is always current, always intelligent, and always backed by reputable sources. Now, to do this efficiently and effectively, the process relies on AI-powered research tools. These aren't just fancy gadgets. They are essential assistants that help process and synthesize huge amounts of complex information, from scientific papers to cultural analyses to philosophical texts, and then turn all of that into the clear, focused lessons that form the very core of this method. The workflow itself is very systematic. It always starts with collecting a wide range of diverse sources on a particular theme. Then, all of these documents are consolidated into a single workspace where an AI assistant helps to synthesize the core arguments and pull out the most important key quotes. The AI is also used to identify those high-leverage vocabulary words we talked about. And then finally, all of this rich information is carefully structured into a minimalist, comprehensive script that maintains all the scientific rigor while still having a natural conversational flow. So we have all of these pillars: the minimalist philosophy, the success psychology, and the rigorous research process. They all connect to this final and, honestly, most important outcome. Because the ultimate goal here isn't just fluency. It's the well-being and the happiness that this entire process can unlock for you. Let me introduce you to an incredibly powerful psychological technique. It's called linguistic distance. Think about it. When we feel really strong emotions like anger or anxiety, our thoughts can just spiral out of control. But by consciously switching your internal dialogue into English, a language that isn't your native tongue, you create this little cognitive gap. For instance, instead of thinking in your native language, "I am so angry," you might think in English, "I am experiencing a feeling of anger." This small shift helps you detach just enough from the raw emotion, process it more rationally, and ultimately find a much greater sense of peace. So, how can we actually put this into practice? Here's a very simple, tangible exercise: daily gratitude journaling in English. It's as easy as it sounds. Every single day, just write down 3 things you're thankful for. This one activity is incredibly powerful. First, it directly integrates mindfulness into your language practice. Second, scientific studies have shown it measurably boosts your happiness. And then from a pure language perspective, it instantly improves your use of the present simple tense, and it forces you to practice using more rich descriptive adjectives. It's a perfect fusion of well-being and language acquisition. Okay, so let's bring all of this together now. We've walked through the four pillars that form this unique blueprint for learning. Now, let's zoom out and really look at the big picture. What this path to sustainable growth truly means for you personally. At the end of the day, when language learning is disconnected from your actual life, it just feels like a chore. It's something you have to do. But when you can link learning English to your most important, biggest life goals, whether that's advancing your career, exploring deep philosophical questions, or simply your desire for personal growth, everything changes. The learning process is no longer just a task on your to-do list, it's given a profound and incredibly energizing purpose. And this brings us to our final question, the one that really sits at the heart of this entire philosophy. I want you to take a moment and just reflect on this for yourself. Is your ultimate goal simply to master a language, to check a box and say that you are fluent? Or is the real goal to use the process of learning that language as a tool, as a framework, to build a better, more intentional, and more fulfilling life? The answer to that question, well, that's what will define your entire journey.